Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It's just the morning still for Steve. 11:30, right?
That's right. 11:30 it is.
And how's the temperature for you right now in terms of like how many degrees or Fahrenheit is it outside?
Mid-70s. It's been really comfortable the last couple of days. It's been the best weather of the tournament starting 2 days ago. It's ideal for the players.
Yeah, because I mean, what was it like the first sort of 10 days? I mean, can you remember what was the worst US Open you remember in terms of heat?
Probably 1985. I remember one of my colleagues who was known for wearing very nice suits to the matches perspired right through his suit during the McEnroe-Villander semifinal to the point where he had to take off his shirt and tie and replace it with a T-shirt, and that was unheard of for him. That year stands out for me, just scorching heat day after day.
All right, well, I'll have to look up. Who can you remember who won it that year? Who won it at the men's and the
That was
women's?
Lendl's breakthrough. Lendl beat McEnroe in the final after losing to McEnroe the year before in the finals, and that was his breakthrough at the Open. He, of course, won the French the year before, but that was a big win for him in New York.
I always remember Lendl had very short hair, but still would sweat profusely at the sides in particular and on top. That was something that stood out for me during some of his Wimbledon runs, and Wimbledon would be much cooler than probably that 1985 in New York.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And of course, it makes me think a bit of Rafa, the perspiration down his face. He always would joke about how much he would perspire to the point where you thought he was going to drown under those beads of sweat. But some do it more than others. Some sweat more than others.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get into the nuts and bolts of the Final Four. Maybe with the exception of one of the Final Four, a bit of a surprise lineup, Steve, right?
Yeah, that's true. Obviously, we didn't expect number 25 seed Jack Draper. I mean, we knew that potentially this was the kind of major that he could turn in, that he had this in him, and we saw him beat Carlos at Queens this year. He's been coming on strong, but we certainly didn't see him in the semifinals. And frankly, I didn't see either Fritz or Tiafoe in the semifinals. So aside from Sinner is the only man who we were pretty sure would be there.
Yes, of course, Sinner had one or two off-court issues going into the tournament, certainly in terms of headlines, but he has indeed made the final. Let's begin with Jack Draper. You did mention him. What have you made of his run to this semi-final? I mean, you mentioned the word surprise. He's not dropped a set. He's broken a few records en route in that respect. What have you made of his run?
Yeah, he's had it. You have to say he's had a kind draw because Jack was going to have to go through Carlos again, who he did beat at Queens, yes, but it was going to be tougher on the hard courts if Carlos is in form. But he was spared that by the Dutchman, and I'll let you pronounce the Dutchman's name. Who was such a fine player, but I don't want to mess with his name right now.
I can do it. But Steve, in tennis, we always have a few cheats like Felix or Botic and so on and so forth. But it's Botic van der Zandschulp, I think. But we can just call him Botic.
Okay, let's call him Botic. Well, of course, that was a break. Jack had not lost his set. He got a retirement in the third set of the first round, then beat Diaz Acosta 4-2-2, and then he plays Botic and beats him very, very soundly 3-4-2, and then Mahac at 3-1-2. His scores have been impressive, and finally capped it off by beating Alex de Minaur yesterday in straight sets 3-5-2. So you have to say he couldn't have asked much more of himself. He couldn't have been much more efficient. So at least from the stamina standpoint, he comes in pretty fresh. He did have some type of hamstring injury going. He had the trainer out there briefly yesterday, but after the trainer left, there was no evidence to me for the rest of that match against de Minaur that he was hindered or hampered in any significant way.
I was going to ask that because that was something watching on TV that was a bit of a concern. But yeah, I think you've made some salient points regarding his run. I mean, Jack is someone who physically has had issues, including against de Minaur in Acapulco this year, and that's over 3 sets. But sometimes when it goes 4 or 5, he does tend to wane somewhat. So in a way, I think he got a bit fortunate in the first round with Zhang because Zhang, in a way, was a bad draw, but everything else since then has been a good draw. But Zhang, obviously, losing the second set 6-love and then retiring the third, that had 5 sets written all over it. And I thought Jack is going to struggle, therefore, to continue in this tournament. But from that moment onwards, it's been sort of no looking back.
Yeah, and obviously the draw was good to him, but that you have to take advantage of. You have to exploit it. He's done that. He served very well. His forehand has looked very good to me. The heaviness of his forehand against de Minaur, to me, was the key, because the ball kept hopping up so high, and normally Alex can handle that kind of spin, but not yesterday. He had really serious issues, and I have to say, in passing, John, that usually I agree with the statisticians when they put up those stats. You'll check the numbers after a match, and you have certain numbers in your mind. They had de Minaur and Draper with an equal number of unforced errors, I believe 30 each in that match yesterday. There's no way that I'm not buying that number, because
it didn't feel like that.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that at all. I'd say that Alex made probably twice as many unforced, in my estimation, as did Draper. And all credit to Draper, because he gave so little away. And also, what I liked about that match was that he'd won the first set pretty comfortably, 6-3. It could have even been 6-2, because I love 40 hold from Alex at the end of the set. And then he had the break in the second set, nearly 2 breaks up, and de Minaur came back to lead 5-4 on serve, and Draper ran off 3 straight games calmly and with great confidence, and then ran out the match easily in the third. So that's really the kind of tennis he's been playing. His wide slice serve in the ad court, I think, is going to be a key against Sinner, as it has against everybody else. The left-handed wicked spin in that ad court has served him very well.
I mean, you do say that he's, you can only beat what's in front of you, but I've already touched on the Zhang fortune. I think Mahatch threw in a very unusual display in that round of 16. Carlos going out is the gift that you probably need to reach your first ever Grand Slam semi-final. And even in the face of de Minaur, I thought there was some uncharacteristic tennis from Alex. Bearing in mind, he played 4 sets, I think, against Jordan Thompson, and there was like 18 unforced errors. And whatever the figure it was substantially more, probably even double or even more than that yesterday. And it didn't feel like a de Minaur performance. I don't know if you thought maybe even Alex, of course, hasn't played a lot of tennis since Wimbledon, whether that may have caught up with him at all.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That was a significant factor, that Alex was giving away so much more than usual. His timing off the forehand was way off. Anything that got up around his shoulder, when he was trying to change direction, go down the line, he was missing. And yeah, it was a significantly subpar performance from de Minaur. But again, again, Draper did what he needed to do, and the second set could have slipped away. If he had been a little less composed at 4-5 in the second set, that complexion of that match could have changed. But he was terrific, and from that point, he won 9 of the last 11 games in the match. So you're right. There have been some odd performances, you might say, or disappointing displays from his opponents, and Mahatch is a better player than that. On the other hand, I don't know, it was the leftiness of Jack. There could have been a number of factors, and Mahatch is still relatively inexperienced, and that was a big moment for him. So I have to say, whatever the reasons, Draper has done his job exceedingly well, regardless of the caliber of play from his opponents.
What have you made of Jannik's run to the semis? We'll hone in a little bit on the Medvedev match in a minute, but let's look at the first 4 rounds. There was a bit of a scare against McDonald. He was down a set and a break, and with all the talk going into the tournament, we were like, wow, are we about to see a crazy upset here? But probably from that moment onwards, with the exception of a hiccup or 2 last night against Daniil, it's been fairly plain sailing. I mean, Tommy Paul was a bit sticky.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your assessment. That was not what we were expecting at the start of the tournament. You wondered whether his mind was still on the off-court issues, but he really settled down to win the last 3 sets, 2-1 and 2 against McDonald. And then he had a tough first set against Mickelson. That set, there was an exchange of breaks, and he was in trouble at 4-all. That set could have possibly gotten away. Once he tucked the first set away, he comfortably picked apart Mickelson, who'd given him a much tougher 4 and 5 match in Cincinnati, and then looked very solid against O'Connell and beat him handily 1-4 and 2. The Tommy Paul match, I think, did him some good. He was tested to be 2 breaks down. He was fortunate, by the way. His timing off the forehand way off in the first set. Got down 2 breaks, as you know. At this level, you shouldn't be able to get out of that set against a player of Tommy's growing stature, but Tommy could not handle the moment. I thought, the crowd was all excited. He was excited. And the next thing you know, they were back on serve. And in fact, Tommy even had to save a set point at 4-5 with an ace out wide to keep himself in the set before Sinner won it in a breaker. And, he played a good breaker, especially from 3-all. And then in the second set, you saw Sinner having to serve his way out of 4-5 in the tie break and win the last 3 points from there. And then he ran away with it in the third. But I thought the tension of that match and the excitement of the crowd and Paul's sporadically brilliant play, it was a good thing for Sinner heading into the Medvedev match. I thought that really, to me, I think that sharpened him up in many ways.
One or two people in the live chat asking if we are live. We are live. It's 11:41 in New York, 4:41 in the UK, and 5:41 here in Spain. And I don't know what time it is in New Delhi, but yes, we are live. And if you want to ask us a question about what's happened like 10 minutes ago, I can tell you, certainly if it's related to the Challenger in Seville. But back to Jannik. Yeah, that Tommy Paul, I felt bad for Tommy. And to be honest with you, when it got to 4-all, that was the match. Is that harsh, or it felt like the match almost?
Well, you did in a way. You mean the first set?
Well, yes and no, Steve. I do. Maybe I'm getting a bit carried away. I just, when it got to 4-all, thought, oh, you can't lose a double break, and then you do go on and lose the set. And as tight as the second set was, I know it was super tight, 7-5 in that tie break. I don't know. I just never felt Jannik was going to lose from there. But feelings can be deceptive, and millions of times in tennis they come back to bite us. But on that occasion, it did prove to be correct with Jannik.
Yeah, I'm largely in accord with you. I would say that I thought when Tommy saved the set point with the ace and then managed to get into the tiebreak that there was still a chance, but I certainly didn't like his chances once Sinner took that first set tiebreak. And then fleetingly, I wondered when Jannik was serving at 4-5 in the second set tiebreak whether Tommy might be able to squeeze this out, and then it's 1-all, and who knows what happens. But yes, no doubt, it still came down essentially to that 2-break lead in the first set for Tommy Paul evaporating, and that's crushing. That's crushing because you're gonna play that back in your mind. I don't care how good you are. You're still, as the match is progressing, you're still wondering how did that happen, because it's such a cushion. All you got to do is win two of your next 3 service games. You can lose one, it's okay, but 2 of the next 3 and the set is over and it's yours, and you're in a decent position to try and win this match. So yeah, I thought I'm with you. I'm pretty much with you. I just thought that maybe in the tie break he gets a second chance. He wasn't able to take it.
I fell asleep about midway through the second set last night of Sinner and Medvedev, so I can't give you too much on it. What did you make of this match?
It's one of the strangest matches they've ever played. As you know so well, John, most of their matches, there have been a few exceptions like Miami this year where Sinner crushed him. But most of their matches are really hard-fought, tight sets. You expect them to come down to 1 break, to some tiebreakers. They're so evenly matched when they're both on. They didn't play well at the same time last night until the 4th set, and that was the best set of the match. With it was Medvedev struggled to get out of his first service game in the open right off the bat, and then Sinner ran away with that first set 6-2, and Daniel really dug in well. I thought he played an excellent second set. He got much more aggressive off his forehand, and he started stepping in. Really, he dictated a lot more than I expected him to. He picked up his serving level, and he races through the second set. But at the start of the third, I thought Medvedev kind of wasted his momentum. He played a sloppy game to go down a break, and the next thing you know, he's blitzed in that set. We don't expect to see 6-2, 6-1 sets, three in a row like that with these 2 guys. It really, frankly, shouldn't happen. And then in the 4th, I thought they both finally were producing it simultaneously. High-quality rallies, pushing each other to the hilt. And Medvedev had his chance with a couple of break points when Sinner was serving at 2-3, and Jannik got out of that very nicely and then broke Daniel in the next game, and that proved to be decisive. But even there, it was nice to see Daniel fight off a match point at 3-5 to make Jannik serve out the match. I felt like the 4th set was the only set that resembled the typical Medvedev-Sinner template. I was frankly disappointed in the match from a spectator standpoint, from a reporter standpoint. I wanted something closer. I wanted something higher caliber, and I felt that we only got it in the 4th.
That does seem to be the consensus of the people I've spoken to as well. Regarding the semi-final then between Jannik and Jack Draper, Jack is a heavy underdog, right?
Yes. Oh, you want me to take? I'm sorry. I thought you were going to ask.
Don't worry. Sometimes with those, the person just takes it away, and other times they go.
All right,
I mean,
I'll take it
by
away.
the way, interviewing tennis players can be like the same as well. You know that, Steve.
Yeah, I do. Sorry about that. No, look, I feel like, of course he is, and that works to his advantage. He's got to figure he's had a great tournament no matter what. No need to put a lot of pressure on himself. I think he's hoping to serve extraordinarily well here, which he must do against Sinner, or there's no chance. He won their only match, but that was in Queens 3 years ago on grass, couple of tiebreaks. It's meaningless, frankly. You can throw that one out the window. Mm-hmm. Yes, he's improved immensely since then. Yes, Sinner has improved immensely since that. But I just feel like on these hard courts, Jannik he's grooved. He's hitting the ball really well off the ground for the most part, exception of, say, that first set against McDonald and the second set last night against Medvedev, where he was a little bit sloppy. But otherwise, I like the way he's conducting himself from the backcourt. I think he's serving well. To me, I can't see it going beyond 4 sets for Sinner. I could even see him winning it in straight sets. Hard-fought sets, good sets, 6-4, 7-5, 6-3, that type of match. But I just feel like he's a level higher than Jack. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, similar. By the way, just when it comes to interviewing players, sometimes it can be a tricky question. You go, bad day at the office, and they just go, yeah. And you think, oh, okay, I wanted you to elaborate on the bad day at the office, because you don't want to say too many words, because you don't want to upset the player, but you still want to get some info. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, I feel similarly. I think Jack has some physical issues, as I've touched on before. We saw the strapping as well yesterday. I think it was good news for him that De Minaur may have been struggling a bit on that side, so it didn't go 4 or 5, because maybe I think the pendulum may well have swung the way of the Australian. Jannik is someone who we have spoken about before, probably a bit more in 5 sets rather than 4, or even some 3-set physical issues he's had. But I think Jannik is probably a year or 2 further down the line physically as well. Because he has put them not to bed, but he has laid 1 or 2 of those physical issues to the rest. I mean, if you remember that 5-setter he had with Zverev a year ago,
yes,
both of them were struggling, but really Zverev is just, fit as a fiddle, and Jannik was struggling that night or that morning, whatever it was, it turned out. I am feeling the same as you. I think Jack, there's a couple of shoots of hope. Jack can just serve bombs or amazingly for 2-3 sets, and it might be enough for him to get a lead. Can he hang on to that lead? I'm not so sure, but it might give him a chance. And like a lot of underdogs, first set probably needs to win that first set, and then just take it from there.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's really hard. Sinner is a great returner. I feel like, yes, if Jack is serving his absolute best, maybe he squeezes out a tiebreak, maybe he squeezes out 1 break and takes that first set. But I feel like Sinner is going to come out of the gates strong and purposeful in a way, kind of like he did in the first set against Medvedev last night. I expect him to try to really assert himself quickly, knowing just what you said, that in Draper's mind, that first set is going to be critical. So I think that Jannik is going to make a major priority to get out in front himself. And I just feel like from the baseline, he's just going to be there's just too much firepower and depth, consistency for Draper to be able to handle. That's my guess going in. But I hope you're right. I'd like to see a hard-fought, reasonably close match. I just sense that Sinner might get through it in 3, if not comfortably in 4.
Yeah, keep an eye on that thigh strapping as well. I mean, as you said, it didn't seem to hinder him yesterday, but yeah, it's something to keep an eye on throughout that match. There are a couple of positive spins for both players I'll put on this. I think Jannik has another gear to go up, and we may well see it in the next 48 hours or so, 72 hours if he makes the final. And on Jack's side, I think he's had a pretty good tournament on the forehand. It's something that I keep an eye on with Jack, because it does sort of hit and miss. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think we might not be talking about it as a weakness in years to come. But right now, it seems to be hit and miss. But in this tournament, for me, it has been a hit, and long may that continue. But like you, I can't see anything beyond a Jannik win.
Yeah, and you're right. I agree. I've been impressed with this forehand too, but I feel like he's going up. you're going into a different league when you play Sinner, who's going to be hitting the ball much harder, deeper, and pressuring you on that side in a way that no other opponent has been able to do thus far. So that's my concern for Jack.
You've seen a lot more of Andy Roddick than I have on the tennis court, 100%. I see a comparison between Draper and Roddick. I think Roddick's serve was bigger than Draper's, as good as Draper's is, but I don't know what other comparisons that you could make between the two players.
Yeah, no, I feel like Andy, I kind of like Draper's backhand more than Andy's. I think that was really a career-long struggle. Andy did well to just sort of try to keep it deep and try to wait for his openings to blast forehands. And obviously it was a much bigger forehand, but yeah, there are some similarities. And I think Andy would be happy to hear that comparison, given what a good fortnight Draper's had so far. But of course, you're bringing up the last. It's interesting that you bring Andy up because he's the last American to win the Grand Slam tournament among the men 21 years ago when he won here. Match point down in the semis against Nalbandian, and then he comes back and wins in 5.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. He hit 138 mile an hour service winner. Just hit a bomb and got out of that match point and then won it in 5. And then in the finals, he beat Juan Carlos Ferrero, who had beaten Andre Agassi. And then Roddick, also the last one to be in the finals here among the men in 06, where he lost to Federer, and the last American to be in a Grand Slam singles final among the men against Federer in 09. So it's funny. It's very timely to bring him into the conversation. But yeah, I can understand that. The way they conduct themselves on the court, there are some similarities between the two, no doubt.
Nice segue, Steve. It takes us over to the other All-American affair on the other side of the draw. As you say, we're going to get the first finalist since 2006. We may yet get the first US winner since 2003. A bit of work to be done yet for both of these players, of course. But we'll begin with Francis, because for me, Francis's year, and I would probably even talk about 12 months rather than calendar year, changed at Wimbledon. I was so impressed with him in that match against Carlos that went 5 sets. He was 2 sets to 1 up. You know, it was a tough loss, but he pushed Carlos more than anyone else at Wimbledon this year, including Novak in the final. And I felt that was a mini turning point for him. And I think obviously getting to the final in Cincinnati and now this run as well sort of backs that up.
I completely agree. At the time, I was a bit disappointed, frankly, only in the sense that he played so well those first 4 sets, got it into a 4-set tiebreak to try to close out Carlos. Carlos outplays him in the tiebreak, and I thought that Tiafoe didn't really give a terribly good account of himself in the 5th, and in some ways wasted the effort. But no doubt it opened his eyes again to playing the kind of tennis that he wants and that he needs to produce. And it definitely led to a great summer. And the Cincinnati run to the final, had a little luck against Holger Rune where he saved a match point on a let cord winner. That was forehand inside in that somehow crawled over the net. But still, got to the final, played a good first set. A good first set against Sinner. And then not terribly well in the second. But that set the stage for this. And as you know, this U.S. Open, it's just somehow every year, the way 2 years ago against Carlos, a 5-set semi, the quarters last year, back in the semis now. He's really been terrific in New York. But I do think, curious to get your thoughts, I do think it's going to take something extraordinary for him to overcome his great friend and compatriot Taylor Fritz, because Taylor's got the 6-1 lead in the rivalry, and he is playing very well himself. And I just feel like Tiafoe has got to take it up about 8 to 10% from where he's been if he's going to beat Taylor. That's my view. How about you?
Yeah, I think you're right. And when you were talking about the Carlos match, a thought crossed my mind, as it did then, and it does occasionally with tennis players, is, I think they're sometimes a bit too happy-go-lucky in that they get to that, they get to set 1 to lead and they think, oh, I might win this match. Then Carlos comes back, and we know how Carlos is in 5 sets. Plus, I think Francis and Carlos get on very well. And as Mary Carrillo once suggested, you need the fangs in this moment. You need to You know, you need to turn into a devil if you like. And I just wonder if Francis doesn't always have that killer instinct. I felt it was the same at times with Ben Shelton a year ago. And so we're going to come to some good news. I think he was a bit unusually subdued in that match. And that was sort of the turning point in the negative sense for Francis until Wimbledon this year. He began his run in New York, by the way, with a very unconvincing win, at least for the latter part of the match against Kovacevic, where he did just get over the line, but that could easily have gone 5. But the turning point, if you want to call it another one in this tournament, was that win over Shelton. I thought Shelton would win that. It would be close and it would be tight, but you know, he did so well to come back from 2-1 down against a player that I think is probably slightly even better than he was a year ago in Ben's, you know, situation is a year on, I think. So that was marvelous. I don't know what you think about some of those comments.
No, I think you're spot on. I thought going in that Shelton would win. And it was an electrifying match. And to me, it was actually so far the highlight of the tournament. It was dazzling from both sides of the net. But what I liked about it from Tiafoe's standpoint was that he went down 2-1. It was kind of a heartbreaking position to be in because he could have, you know, he played well enough to maybe be up 2-1. And but I thought he never deviated from this game plan, that he was so disciplined from the backcourt, and he was going to make Ben keep coming up with the shots. He was going to wear him down. He was going to extend those rallies and rely on his depth and his speed and force Ben to come up with winners or extraordinary shots. And sure enough, I could feel it happening by early in the fourth. I could feel Ben's legs were feeling it. I felt like if Ben doesn't win this 4-set, he's not winning this match. And Francis played a great fifth. But I like the fact that he was so disciplined and so purposeful in that match. And unlike a year ago, where he you remember the match a year ago where they play and they're 1-set all, and Ben made an unbelievable forehand winner at set point down in the third that turned the match. And Francis was subdued in the fourth. He couldn't figure out a way to get the crowd. The crowd connection to him is so critical. I feel like he needs that. That's important to him. And here he was playing the fellow American and not quite sure how to handle it a year ago. This time he picked his spots and kind of made the eye contact and extended the arms and had got them enough on his side to help him without them being anti-Ben by any means. But I felt like he gave a very mature performance there that day. And obviously that's the key to where he is now, that he survived that. And the other key, of course, is that Novak Djokovic going out to Popyrin really spared Francis, because he would have been coming off this 5-set contest against Shelton to then have to face Djokovic, and that would not have been fun, especially an informed Djokovic. And I think, frankly, it's a matchup that's very comfortable for Novak. So that was another key. It was beating Shelton and being spared having to confront Djokovic.
A little bit like the Draper one, but no offense to Botic van der Zandschulp, I do think that task is probably slightly easier for Jack than Francis's was against Alex. And Alexei was a tough assignment, and Tiafoe came through it. I remember watching the final game of the match, and he hit a forehand winner on match point. And I like a good winner on match point, you know, an unforced error or a double fault from the opponent, but a lovely winner as it was. It was an arcing, sort of nice angled forehand winner that he hit from a slightly advantageous, but no guarantees, especially on match point. And that was great to see Francis win in that manner. And he had to fight back, I think, in the second set as well to get that set. And of course, had the losing the third set 6-2. So that was a tough assignment. Dimitrov too. Anyway, go on, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to throw in, John, the amazing thing about that second set was that Popyrin was serving for it with a 40-love lead. And so that was such and Tiafoe discussed it afterwards. Like, obviously he just taking it a point at a time, and suddenly he's a deuce, and he's thinking, oh my God, you know, that was the last thing he expected. I'm sure at 40-love down, he's already in his mind mentally preparing for the third set. So even though he lost the third set, the fact that he came back to win the second, he had such a big cushion. And as you say, then he finished it off nicely. But not very often will you break somebody that serves as big as Popyrin when that player has a 40-love lead, triple set point.
Just a question in the live chat about Leighton Hewitt on Popyrin's coaching team. Yes, I think you'll see this quite a lot with Davis Cup captains, that they do dip in and out of certain players' sort of boxes at least, right, Steve?
Sorry, would you repeat the end?
Leighton Hewitt on Popperin's coaching team. I just got a question in the live chat about that. And I did see him in the box. And I do see him. I see this a lot with Davis Cup captains. I've seen it with the Italy captains sometimes in Jannik's team as well. I mean, it's just sort of, it seems like a momentary thing. It's not a permanent thing. But yes, I think he's there or thereabouts anyway for Popperin.
Yeah, and I think he's given him a lot of good sound advice. And Popperin, it happens so often when a player comes up with a big one. What I found interesting about that was that Popperin, after he beat Novak in 4 sets, was kind of matter of fact about it, that it didn't surprise him. He had 2 good matches with the slams earlier in the year. But I thought somebody who talks that way should then go out to play Tiafoe saying there's no stopping me now. But we didn't get that from him. Now, I understand it's totally different atmospherically because you're playing an American, you're playing exceedingly popular American in Tiafoe. So the circumstances were different, but I didn't see that same kind of swagger that I saw against Novak. And I'm sure that might have disappointed Hewitt a bit, that he wanted to see more of that. Like, here, I belong, and I beat Djokovic, I'm not losing to you. But instead, he was a bit meek, I thought, in that match. And that's taking nothing away from Tiafoe, who rose to the occasion. But I was a bit surprised by Popperin's demeanor and how he carried himself in that match.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about regarding coaches, actually, of course, is David Witt is on the Francis' team. It's been a couple of months now, I believe. And I love the yin and yang because, you know, I wouldn't want to play poker against David Witt because he's got a good poker face, put it that way. Francis wears his heart on his sleeve, as we know. But I like that combination, and it has coincided with some good results for Francis too.
Yeah, it has. Obviously he's worked with a lot of top players. He had a great run with Pegula, and I feel like, and in Venus Williams, he's had quite a track record, David Witt. Somehow the chemistry is there, and I'm happy that it happened for Tiafoe because I was worried a bit, frankly, John, when he parted ways with Wayne Ferreira, who I thought did a great job with him. And Wayne was the kind of guy that would not tell him what he wanted to hear, but tell him what he needed to hear. He's very frank, and I thought that was a very good mix. And Wayne was around when he got to the semis of the Open 2 years ago. So I'm sorry that one ended. But now this one I'm hoping will last. Witt's a very good influence in that, and I hope that they can have a number of good years together.
Yes, fingers crossed. They may even have a good 72 hours together. We'll see how that pans out. Of course, there is somebody on the other side of the net, which will be trying to prevent that from happening, and that's Taylor Fritz. Taylor got to the 4th round without dropping a set before dropping one against Casper Ruud. But probably his tournament was defined by maybe 2 results. Matteo Berrettini was a tough assignment in the 2nd round, but that was done in straight sets. And then probably, really, you could argue, don't come any tougher than Zverev in the quarterfinal in New York. One that I thought Zverev would win, but Taylor ended up winning that one in 4 sets.
Yeah, you described it well. The Berrettini win gave him confidence. Berrettini was hoping he would kind of break his losing sequence again in that rivalry, but it was not to be. And then Taylor was down a set to Casper Ruud, and Ruud was soaking through his sneakers, and he kind of unraveled, and Taylor took command in that match. The Zverev match, I agree with you. I felt the same way going in. I thought, is he going to lose to Taylor again after he squandered a 2-set lead on the center court of Wimbledon a few months back? I didn't see it. And I thought, Zverev had been playing well the whole tournament, and that maybe all these upsets were now playing out well for him. And that maybe this was going to finally be, perhaps he would at least get himself into the final and take his chances against, at that point, either Sinner or, most likely Sinner, but possibly Medvedev at that point. So, yeah, 2 things about that match. Fritz was very composed. He, even after Zverev had a love 40 hold there at the end of the 1st set, he didn't let it bother him. He outplayed him in the tie break because he could have ended the set when he had love 40. And then even he got broken in the 2nd set, went down 5-3, and Zverev serves it out, and it's 1 set all. And I could sense that Taylor's mood was sagging a bit. But then he immediately went up in the 3rd, 3-love, and even after Zverev got it back to 3-all, he won that set. So I just thought he was very resilient. He was serving very well the whole match. Forehand a bit in and out, but it was better than Zverev's. And what I liked about Fritz was that he took control in that match, John. I was struck again by the passivity of Zverev. He camps out so far behind that baseline, and you see it even more live than you do on TV. And it just struck me that why is he relying so much on that defense, as we've seen so many times, and Taylor wouldn't let him get away with it. I mean, we've got the great arm reach of Zverev, and he does defend well, but he's capable, I think, of being much more aggressive and assertive than he is. So I thought from the baseline, Fritz outplayed him. He outserved him when it counted, and then he played two really good tiebreakers, Fritz, while once again, Zverev was found wanting in those tiebreaks. Fascinating match, because I didn't see Taylor Fritz, and no knock on Taylor, but I didn't see him beating Sasha Zverev in consecutive major championships, but he's done just that.
Right. I mean, this is probably the biggest announcement he's made possibly in his career. I mean, first time in a Grand Slam semi-final, but there were some mini signs. You mentioned the previous win over Alexander in Wimbledon, albeit that he was a little bit hampered, the German. But if we go back to the two matches that Fritz had against Novak in New York a year ago, and then in Australia this year. Now, I know that the two Novaks were slightly different as well, and there's always, two people on the court and things have to happen. But I did think that Taylor in that match a year ago, honestly, it was painful to watch that the tactics that Taylor was deploying from the back of the court, that's rarely going to win against Novak. Probably only Carlos really can probably do that, or maybe Rafa on clay. But then in that match that Taylor had with him against Novak in Australia, I thought, you know what? I can see it developing, Taylor. And in fact, things he's actually playing not a dramatically different game to what he played in September of 2023, but he's executing it much better. And I've been watching him sort of on and off throughout the year and seeing some gradual improvements, which is all you can ask for. And I think we've seen the fruition of that here in New York this year.
Yeah, excellent analysis. I would only say that the only area I would disagree is just that that Wimbledon quarterfinal I thought was very disappointing, taking nothing away from Musetti. Taylor has come off the big win over Zverev. He's going to try to earn himself another meeting with Novak, this time in a semifinal. And I thought he gave a disappointing account of himself against Musetti. On the other hand, what I do like about him, John, I mean, everything you said on the positive end is true. And that was a very good performance against Novak in Australia. At one stage, I think he'd saved 15 break points. Took so long before Novak could finally break him in that match. But I feel like he's very good at leaving his disappointments behind him and just moving on. He can have a distressing loss, and then it's gone. He just moves on. And this tournament, he's just been as solid as I can remember him. So I just feel like his level has been consistently higher in my view. And we described how good Francis has been. But I believe that you look at Taylor's draw, he's had a tougher draw in some ways. He's made it look easy. And he's come off with a match that should be beneficial, to be tested that way by Zverev, to win two tiebreakers in a 4-set match like that I feel like he will be ready for Tiafoe. Now the question becomes, how does the crowd, what is their reaction? It's two Americans. So again, Tiafoe has this problem that he's had when he plays Shelton, that it's a fellow American, so he can't automatically bring them around him. But I think there will be moments. He'll be more demonstrative. I suspect Taylor and his camp, that the people around Taylor will say to him, look, we know your personality, we know your style, but this is one of those times where you can't let Francis take command of the stage and be the one connecting with the crowd and getting them to offer a vociferous support. You've got to, from time to time, do a little fist pumping. I remember in the old days, Paul Anacone would urge Pete Sampras to do that. Maybe do it a bit more than you necessarily would, because it's going to be part of. One of the reasons it could have an effect on the outcome. You don't want to have that crowd decidedly on your opponent's side, and also to allow Francis to feed off the crowd the way he does almost better than anyone else. But I think Taylor is a real pro, and I think he will handle that just fine. And I think as long as his serve holds up as well as it has, that this match is in his hands largely. Not entirely, but largely. John?
Sorry, I think my internet went, but I'm back with you, Steve. Yeah, one thing I liked what you mentioned about the fist pumping was I like to see that in a player that if they're like, let's say Francis is down a set and a break, or even 2-0 or something. If Francis then reacts with like if he gets a break back, or if he wins a tight game, and it's like you're also sending a message to your opponent. I still believe, you don't celebrate a point if you don't believe anymore. Whereas I like to see that. I mean, probably the best example in recent years of that was when Rafa was down 2-0, and he was holding serve in that third set in some very difficult circumstances, but he was just holding serve, so it was still a long way back. But he was celebrating, and I thought, oh, okay, so even at Rafa at 35 or whatever he was at the time, and maybe having some, struggles physically, just coming back, I think, you're sending a message to your opponent in that point, and you're probably also helping yourself, and of course, getting the crowd maybe with you too.
No, you're so right. And Rafa is the perfect example of using positive energy at unexpected times to spur himself on and to keep the crowd excited as well. And I remember when he played Djokovic in the 2013 final here at the Open, and it was a set all. And I remember he's almost got down 2 breaks in the third, and he escaped that and held serve, and then he did the fist pump to his corner. And it's important for players to do that at crucial moments. And I'm convinced that Taylor will do it, not overdo it, but that we'll see a little bit of that out of him so that he can keep the crowd as neutral as possible. And if he does do that, I think they will be very enthusiastically behind both players. It'll be essentially a neutral crowd if Taylor handles his end of things well. And I expect he will.
But we are both leaning towards Taylor, right?
Yeah, and don't you think, and just looking at their games, I feel like, okay, Taylor's forehand can go at times, but I think it's a bigger shot than Francis's. I think his backhand is better. I think his serve is better. I think you kind of break down their games, and it's hard to see unless Francis just hits a magical spell and gets ignited by the crowd that Taylor doesn't win this match I would say, in 4 sets.
Yeah, I even think that the mentally, if I had to back, I mean, I don't always back Taylor. I think he has had a few wobbles. We remember, him obviously, having that match with Rafa in the quarters at Wimbledon a couple of years ago, where I think mentally he did sort of fade in the 5th set because Rafa was there for the taking. I've seen him, have some tough 5-set losses to Novak, for example, in 21 in Australia. And yeah, so I don't always trust Taylor, but I think he may even have taken a step forward there too. And Francis has his moments mentally, both positively and negatively. But I think you're right. Most departments, Taylor just edges it, and that explains why he's 6-1 up in the head-to-head, which is another reason I think I have to back Fritz.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also, but he'll be professional, and I don't think he'll assume that just because he's got a 6-1 record that guarantees him anything. He'll take nothing for granted, and he'll try to put the friendship aside. These guys have had a very nice history as buddies through the years too, and obviously that Taylor is not going to let that get in the way, and same for Francis. I hope we get a high caliber. I do expect it to be high quality. When I say Taylor in 4, I don't see one-sided sets, but I see him prevailing.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Okay. Well, that brings us to a close with the semi-final predictions. I guess both of us are leaning on Jannik to win the title overall, though, right?
Yes, I am. I feel like, here's what I'll say about that briefly. I think that Sinner, I cannot see Taylor. It's odd because I can't. I'm having a hard time seeing Taylor losing to Francis, but in turn, I'm having a hard time seeing Taylor beating Sinner. Tiafoe, outside chance, but I don't see how he puts 3 sets together.
Taylor has a better chance, I think, than France. Having seen what happened in Cincinnati,
right?
I think Jannik can play a lot better than he did in Cincinnati. The first set was super close, to be fair, and then Jannik ran away with the second set. But I think Taylor could do some damage. I'd like to see how the 2 matches pan out, obviously, on Friday, and then reassess maybe the final if it is Jannik and Taylor. But yeah, I would lean towards Jannik to win the title overall at this stage, especially with what's left on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sinner, it will be, I would see him beating either guy in 3 or 4 sets. I feel like he gets through the Draper match, and then he can taste the title. That's now obviously he'll have to deal with it with a really pro-American crowd. But again, I think that crowd would get more animated if it was Tiafoe than if it was Fritz. That's my guess. But I think Sinner right now is poised to win this tournament and his second major of the year.
Yeah, and they would have been splitting the majors with Carlos Alcaraz, just like the big three used to split the majors on so many occasions. Steve, big thanks for joining me today. Enjoy what's left of the tournament in New York. Obviously, we've got the women's semi-finals coming up later today, and then the men's semi-finals and whatever else remains in the tournament. And yeah, we'll catch up again soon. Thanks for joining us. Big thank you once again.
Yes, thank you very much, John. I enjoyed it.
Make sure you check out Steve as well. Any of the array of books that he's written in the past. And I believe there's one in the works, albeit it might be another few months or even a bit longer away. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, I don't think it will come out. It may not come out until early 26, but I'll be turning it in early next year. The Immortals of American Tennis, right in the midst of that project now.
Nice. And of course, it's a big moment for American tennis with two women in the American women in the semis, of course, in the shape of Navarro and Pegula, and of course with Taylor Fritz and Frances Tiafoe. So it could, they may even get a line or two somewhere in your book if they have a memorable US Open next 48, 72 hours. But yes, a lot of people in the chat as well talking about American tennis. So do check that out as and when it comes out, or any one of the array of books that Steve has written. And yeah, once again, I just want to reiterate, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, John.
And to everybody else, you know the drill.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.